Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show. Discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It's time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you man enough to undefine masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? Even when I say that, I feel like I have to grunt and puff up my chest and act all tough and hardcore. Is that what masculinity means? Why is masculinity so narrowly defined while femininity has nuances and layers? Are men allowed to be vulnerable? Can they be brave in being transparent? Our guest today is Justin Baldoni. He is the author of the book, Man Enough, Undefining My Masculinity. Now, you might recognize Justin. He's an actor, a director, a producer, an entrepreneur, a changemaker, and his efforts are focused on creating impactful media and entertainment. He is the creator and the director of CW's My Last Days, which is an uplifting series about life as told by courageous people living with terminal illnesses. And he's also the creator of Man Enough, the dinner conversation series, which dives into traditional masculinity. As well, Baldoni has established Wayfarer Studios to further create purpose-driven content. And he's directed and produced Wayfarer Studios' first film project, which is called Clouds, and it is now streaming on Disney+. The film is Disney's first ever narrative acquisition on its global platform. Coming up next for him, Justin is set to direct Hold Back the Stars for Lionsgate. And he also serves as chairman of the Wayfarer Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming the way that communities see and respond to the needs of people experiencing homelessness. Whoa, Justin, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so funny listening to all of that. It's like, what do I do here?
And I didn't even I scratched the surface. There was a lot more.
I have to say, for the audience, she did that in one take. She did that in one take. That is a hard thing to do, Desiree. I would have taken 3 takes. The performance, the man, I was entertained. Are you not entertained? I was entertained.
Oh, I am so glad you were entertained. I am entertained by your book and the theme. And I just want to dig into Undefining My Masculinity. Justin, what's that mean? What are you doing here with this book?
I don't know. I talk to my therapist about it every week. What am I doing here with this book? It's a great question. Why the hell did I write this book? Why did I choose this? Could have just been an actor or just right. It's that old idea of stay in your lane, shut up and dribble, right? Would have been so much easier. This is not easy work. This is about deep self-work and reflection. And Man Enough is at its core about my challenging of the status quo, of the things that I was taught, of my own socialization as a man, the system, if you will, with my inherent privilege, both as a male and as a white person, and also not redefining it, but undefining it, because I realized in my work over the last 7 or 8 years, as I've been doing this men's work and digging into masculinity, that redefining it would just be perpetuating the same problem. It would just need to keep being redefined. And also, who the hell am I to be the spokesperson for men to redefine this idea? And what I realized was we have to undefine it. We have to take us out of the box and get rid of the box. And that's really the key, because when you define something, you inevitably leave entire groups of people out. And I want to make room for anybody who identifies or sees themselves as a man to be allowed to feel like men. Mm-hmm. Because what I learned and what I've noticed and what I have gathered from most men, even the ones who challenge this, is that there have been points and times in all of our lives where even though we are men, biologically, we don't feel like it. And as you said earlier, that is the difference between masculinity and femininity. Masculinity has to be earned, and it can be taken away. By whom? No idea. Who decides it? Who decides that poor boy's masculinity can be removed from him, and then suddenly he's labeled a girl, right? Who decides these rules? Where did they come from? Who wrote the scripts that have been passed down from generation to generation? Whereas femininity cannot be taken away. It's a birthright, right? Now you can add masculinity to femininity, but you cannot take away femininity in the way that you can take away masculinity. And that is the problem. And as boys, we are taught at a very early age, as Bell Hooks says in Will to Change, to engage in a psychic act of self-mutilation, to commit acts of soul murder. And that soul murder looks like cutting ourselves off from our hearts, desensitizing ourselves, numbing ourselves, like drowning out and killing our empathy and our compassion, and pledging allegiance to a club that we don't even know exists, really doesn't exist, at the expense of not just our humanity, but of women. We pledge our allegiance to men at the expense of women. We dehumanize women and gay and gender nonconforming and trans folks. And we do it all in a way to lift ourselves up in a zero-sum game that has no winner.
Oh, okay. You striking to the core of something that you just see all the time. You hear the phrase, "You throw like a girl." And it means that the feminine is somehow less than the masculine.
Yeah.
So
it goes deep.
It goes so deep, right?
I remember, I love Google for these little like mini experiments because it just validates so much, right? I remember early on when I was preparing for my TED Talk, I was just like, okay, well, feminine, masculine, like you Google feminine. And it's even down to music. Feminine can also be known as a weak beat. Right? This is how deep our patriarchal system goes, right? Who wrote the rules on music, which has existed long before there was ever written language, right? Music. And here we are talking about I think it's I don't know the exact definition, it's been years, but like a historically or a weak beat. And I went, wow, even in music, we are associating weakness with femininity. And then you go and you look at the way that we use languages as kids and boys. You throw like a girl, don't be a girl, don't be a pussy, right? Mm-hmm. And then equally as problematic are homophobic slurs, right? Oh, don't be gay, blah, blah, blah. And all of these things are used as weapons against men by men, against boys by boys. That's how we police each other. The worst thing that could ever happen for a young boy is to be called a girl.
Yeah.
So what are we saying with that language? What are we teaching our boys? When a dad says that to a boy, what are we teaching our boys? We're teaching our boys that inherently they're more powerful, they're stronger, they're better, they're more valued than girls. And we don't even realize how far deep that goes in our psyche and our subconscious, and the way that shows itself in our everyday life growing up as boys to adolescents to men. And it's so deep that it's subconscious. And because it goes so deep, we don't even realize we're doing it. We have no desire to fix it. And it's one of the reasons why it's we objectify, the list goes on, and it all comes back to our language and these scripts that we've been given and how we've been taught as young boys growing up into men. And
that affects friendships, relationships,
everything.
It goes down the road.
There's not a thing in this world that it doesn't affect. It even affects women, which is something that a lot of people are not talking about, in that women are also socialized the same way. Bell Hooks writes about this as well. And the reason I always want to check myself, because it's hard for me as a man to talk about this, but reading and learning from women and female authors, I feel comfortable saying it. Women have their own internalized misogyny because women have also been raised in the same culture, right? Men, our patriarchal culture has in fact socialized many women to believe that they want a man to be as much of a man as the men police themselves to be, which creates this whole other issue, right? And so in many ways, us men, we're stuck. We need to get out of it. Deep down, we need and want to be free from it. We want to be liberated from these chains, from this armor that we are taught we have to put on every day of our lives from the time we're born. Women want us free from it, and yet we're all perpetuating the same problem to keep us in that box and to keep us armored.
But having this conversation and this book is a step in the right direction.
Baby step.
for the solution. Yeah. Well, it has to start somewhere. And let's talk about this idea. You hear it a lot, mansplaining. He's mansplaining to me. I've been mansplained to before, trust me. But it also goes to the fact that men have this need. They are supposed to have all the answers. So, rather than knocking down the poor guy who's trying to mansplain to you, maybe understand from his perspective, this is what he's conditioned to believe is his role. Can you talk about that a little?
Well, yes and no. What I would hate to see happen is women feel so bad for men that they don't tell a guy when he's mansplaining. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that it's a yes and situation, right? And in acting and improv, it's always yes and, right? You never want to say no, but, because then what you're doing is you're invalidating somebody else's thoughts and feelings. What we want to do is build off of that. So this idea of mansplaining as an example, for anybody who maybe doesn't know what mansplaining is, it's when you basically tell a woman and explain something to her that she already knows. Generally, that has to do with a female experience, right? That's mansplaining. And I even talk in the book about the phenomenon of manspreading, which is pretty funny. But so yes, I think there's an element of compassion that I think in general we're missing, which is, of course, I want women to have an element of compassion for men who feel they need to explain something to a woman that they already know. However, it doesn't negate the fact that they're still doing it and they should be stopped. Because this has been happening to women forever. I mean, you probably can't even count how many times a man's explained a basic idea to you that you already knew. And I met it from many of the women I know in my life. They're so used to it, they don't even say anything. They just nod and smile. Mm-hmm. Right? They just nod and smile. They're just used to it. Because, okay, here we go again. Oh, thank you. I hadn't thought of it that way, right? Because it's just too much. Why? Because women know the fragility of the male ego. Women know, I believe, that if they say something or if they interrupt and say, I already know, it's going to then hurt the male ego, which is going to cause far more harm than good. And it will set off a spiral or a chain reaction, which they will have wished they would have just shut up in the first place, which is what they normally do for the sake of the male ego.
Yes. And for the sake of the woman too, because then she gets labeled too talkative, all of those stereotypical things. She's bitch. She's, too strong.
Well, that's right. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the idea that masculinity can be taken away, right? Mm-hmm. Why do men say these things to women? Why are women bitches or difficult or this or this? And again, we have to also be mindful that if you are a person of color, then if you are a black woman, you're basically tiptoeing through life half the time, because you know that if you just are assertive at all in the way that even a white woman can be, or anywhere close to a way that a man can be, you're labeled difficult. Mm-hmm. Right? So the intersection of this with racism is a whole another situation. But the privilege and the idea that we can take away one's masculinity also comes down to this root idea of this fake word called emasculated. Mm-hmm. It's not a real word. That's not a real thing. How can one be emasculated? What's the feminine version of that word? It's such a gendered word. Is there? What's the word for a woman whose femininity can be taken away? I've never heard of it. I mean, maybe we can Google it and find it. But it's such a gendered term. So if a woman interrupts or says, hey, you're mansplaining, or I already know this, God forbid that man's masculinity is threatened in that moment, which is tied to the fragility of our egos, and he's emasculated. Cuts off his balls, right? It's like, come on. Yeah. Are our balls? Yes, our balls are fragile. We know that our balls are fragile. Far more fragile than the female anatomy, genitalia. But is it that fragile that the second a woman stands up to us or tells us the truth, that she's cutting off our balls?
Right.
Right? Are we neutered? No, we're not. It's all performative. This whole system is built around the fragility of our egos. And I believe that we men are so much stronger than this. You can have the strongest guy in the world. You can have the biggest muscles. You could be whatever alpha, again, which is another term that I describe in the book, the myth of the alpha wolf. Like, again, not a real thing, I believe. But you have this idea of what an alpha is. And you're telling me that guy can be emasculated by a powerful woman? No, real strength is being willing to sit in the discomfort of a woman telling you the truth and say, oh, wow, you're right. Let me work on that. Or if you disagree, which you're allowed to do, say, I disagree, but at least I see your point. Let's talk about it. Versus the way we always respond with our fragility, which is defensiveness, and puffing out our chests and then attacking.
Yeah,
right?
That attack. Yeah. Now, one of the things that you brought up here is privilege and race and how that's at play in the socialization of white men. And I know in your book, you describe getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in regard to your masculinity. And it seems that that's where this is going too. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, in chapter 5 of my book, I talk about privilege. And what's funny is I noticed that I was very comfortable. And by the way, when I say very comfortable, I mean like comfortable in the uncomfortable, talking about sexism and masculinity and my male privilege. I was comfortable there. And for some reason, I hadn't been willing to go to the uncomfortable place, even more uncomfortable place of talking about my white privilege and the ways that my whiteness has benefited me from birth. And the fact that I was reluctant meant that there was something there that I had to explore. And it just so happens to be that my best friend in the world happens to be a black man and someone who will always tell me the truth. And for years had been making me aware of the subtle ways in which I had unconscious biases. And I would say things that weren't okay or choose to not see things that were happening to him. I call them in the book bee stings, right? Little bee stings, microaggressions that I just would refuse to see.
Can you give us an example?
Because it was too. Yeah, in the book I talk about a moment when I was when Jamie was one of my best men, and we were shopping for my wedding shirt, and we went to a store in this mall in LA. This, the Beverly Center. It's a nice, big, beautiful mall, and we went into one of these like fancy kind of designer stores in the mall. And we both had our Starbucks, and we walked in, and we kind of went our separate ways, and the manager walked directly up to him and told him that he couldn't carry the drink in the store. And Jamie's like, why? Like, are you afraid that I'm going to spill this drink on your nice shirts? And then I'm not going to be able to afford to buy one of your nice shirts? Like, and it became this whole thing. Whereas when I walked in, somebody immediately greeted me to help me to see what I wanted to buy. And then it became a whole thing. And then I walked over to him and I saw what was happening. And of course, as the white savior that I am, proceeded to tell him that it wasn't about race and everything's okay. In which case it was. We ended up leaving, and he got really pissed at me again, because these types of things had happened before. Because us white people want to make sure we say to many of our Black friends, oh, it's not all about race, man. Why you got to make everything about race? When in reality, to them, it is about race, because it has always been about race. And to us, it has never been about race, which is the definition of privilege, of white privilege. My ability to walk into a store and immediately be greeted as if I'm going to buy something is privilege. Whereas going into a store and to immediately be looked at as if you're going to steal something is the opposite of that. So we leave, we talk, and he gets upset at me. We're then walking into a different store, and he sees a Black guy working at this other store, and he walks in. He says, "Hey, brother, can I come into this place? We're looking for a shirt. Can I come into your place with my coffee?" He's like, and the guy says to him, "Brother, as long as you buy something, I don't care what you carry into the store." And again, you see the difference.
Yeah.
And it was many conversations that Jamie had with me, lovingly, sometimes not so lovingly, begging me to see the reality of it and to use my platform to be equally as passionate about being anti-racist as I am about being anti-sexist. It was years of that. And then, of course, after George Floyd passed away, for some reason, it took another video of an unarmed Black man dying at the hands of police for me to really recognize what I had kind of seen all along, but only tiptoed in. Because I'd used my voice, I'd talked about it, I'd said all of these things, but it never really dedicated time and energy to it, or put myself in a situation that would be deeply uncomfortable as I did here. So I finished the book, and then I went back and I wrote chapter 5. I put it right smack dab in the middle of the book because it was so important for me to recognize that just as so many women are frustrated by men being unwilling to look at their unearned privilege as men, so many people of color and Black folks are so frustrated by white folks being willing to not look at their unearned privilege of being white.
Yeah.
And I sit at the intersection of both, because not only am I a man, I am a white man. And you cannot separate those two things.
Can we talk a little bit about body issues? This is something that women have all the time. We feel too fat. We feel too old. We need skin cream. We need makeup. We need cosmetic surgery. And we kind of think men don't necessarily have it as bad as we do. But
why do we think that? Why do we think that, Desiree?
Right.
We think that because men don't talk about it. Because we can't talk about it. See, what we don't realize is that the same objectification and standards that men put on women, and have been forever, that have been causing women so much pain, we put on each other. We put on ourselves. But we don't talk about it. We can't talk about it. Now, of course, it looks very different.
Yeah.
We sexualize and objectify women. We treat women like objects, as possessions, as things to acquire, as notches on a belt. It's different in that way. But for us men, we also suffer. And there's nobody that we can talk to about it, because God forbid the thing we choose to talk about, which we're told we're not allowed to talk about anything, but if we choose to talk about something, we're talking about body image. No, as men, we have created a world in which we've normalized big, hairy beer bellies to make ourselves feel better. We've said, oh no, it's okay to have a dad bod, to make ourselves feel better. But if you were to put a woman in that situation, she'd be fat shamed.
Yeah.
Right? There's a consistent double standard in the way that we treat women and men from the male gaze. The problem is that we suffer from the exact same thing we help perpetuate. So us men, we need to be big and strong. We need to be masculine, right? We need to be ripped. We measure our masculinity. I mean, look at The Rock. Look at Schwarzenegger. Look at these guys. Like, some of the most famous men in the world have always had the best bodies. We idolize that, right? The Greek gods. Look at the depictions of them. We've drawn what we view and feel is masculine. But at what expense? So what happens to somebody who doesn't look like that? What happens to the men who don't look like that? What happens to men who can't put on muscle, skinny men, men who are deemed feminine? Where do they fall on the spectrum? Well, we have body image issues. We just can't talk about it. We're insecure about our shoulders fitting into shirts. We're insecure about our big bellies. The idea that a man doesn't care how big his belly is or how he looks in a shirt is such bullshit. We've convinced ourselves that we don't care because it's the lack of caring. It's the freedom, the privilege of being able to say, I don't give a shit what I look like. That we have normalized and created this world where like we can justify how our bodies look in any situation. But deep down, we know we don't want to look like that because deep down, we know the standard that we set. And that's where the issue lies. So I can be a super skinny kid and be bullied for being super skinny and made fun of, haha, where are your abs, Baldoni, or whatever it is. Grow up to be ripped, then be shamed from the guys who are out of shape for being ripped. Yeah. Oh, put on your shirt, dude. Why are you always showing off? Put on your shirt, man. Come on. Right? Then get out of shape again and feel insecure because I don't look like that. And I'm never happy. And there's never anyone to talk to about it. We have no place to talk to about it. We're just expected to be, no matter what, from birth, comfortable with our bodies. And the fact is we're not. And it's our muscles, it's our penis size, you name it. We're all insecure on some level. And if we're not, we're just not looking at it. And that's fine. There are some men who are just very comfortable in their bodies. Great. That's fantastic. That's also male privilege. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm sorry. And this might be just, maybe I don't know enough women. I tend to know far more women than men. I cannot think of one woman in my life or that I've ever met who's been comfortable with her body if or when she's out of shape. No. But I know men who could give two shits.
Right.
That's male privilege. That's the double standard. And at the end of the day, we also, as men, when we build muscle, when we go to the gym, when we do these things, we convince ourselves we're doing it for women, right? Get big shoulders, get, the perfect body, she loves this part of you. We surveyed 100 women. This is what they said. In reality, I believe that men are going to the gym to get in shape, to get big and strong, not for women, but for other men.
Yeah.
That's my hot take. We want respect. We want to be seen as a bro, as a guy, as a dude, as an alpha. We want to be seen. We want to be the protector. We want to be the strongest guy in the gym because we get respect from other dudes. It's not about the women. We've been convincing ourselves it's about the women. How do we know that? Because when you really do a survey with women and when you really dig into the data around women, sure, women might like a good body, but it's not number one.
Exactly.
Nobody stays with a guy just because he's got a great body. No, that goes away very quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You nailed it. Tell us a little bit. We're running up against the clock here, but I want to ask you about the Wayfarer Foundation. And just to speak a little bit, I mean, you've accomplished so much, Justin. I mean, it seems like you're giving back. You want to talk a little bit about that?
The Wayfarer Foundation is it's an extension of our studio, Wayfarer Studios. I started the foundation maybe 6 years ago. And it was a desire to work with the unhoused population of Los Angeles. I grew up in the Baha'i faith and the Baha'i writings. There's a lot of writings about the disparity between the rich and the poor and the duty that we have to take care of the poor. Abdu'l-Baha says in the Baha'i writings, he says, to tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor. Mm-hmm. And so so for my birthday, God knows, it was 10 years ago, I started just getting some friends together to go down to Skid Row and just to talk to people. And we'd make little lunch bags and clothes and get our old clothes that we weren't going to throw away. And we'd go down and the goal wasn't to clothe and feed everybody down there because there's thousands and thousands of people, but it was, can we go and connect with people? And that was what I wanted to do for my birthday. And some of it was selfish because I generally around birthdays start to feel kind of bad about myself. It's an emotional time for me. I kind of compare myself to where I think I should be and all of this stuff. And in our faith, we're also told that when we get into that place that we should go be of service. Go be of service to somebody who has less than you. That will help you remember how privileged you are. And it will also at the same time warm your heart by sharing up theirs. And over time, as I kind of developed a little bit of a following, when I got Jane the Virgin, and suddenly, I had all these followers, and I kind of had whatever you call it in our entertainment business, like my C-list celebrity and all that. I said, let's see if I can make this bigger and draw more attention to what's actually happening down there. So I created the Carnival of Love, which was basically a day of human kindness where thousands of individuals from around Los Angeles and the country and world would fly in, get partnered and paired with a member of the Skid Row community, and you'd go through this multi-city block event together where, yes, of course, you'd get food and clothing and shoes and all of these things, but you could also, if you were living on the streets or unhoused, have access to all of the services you could ever want in one place that you might not have access to with a bus or a car or scheduling or whatnot.
Right.
From DMV services to health services and medical services to psychologists and to lawyers and resume builders and haircuts and massages and feet washing, all of it. And you'd get to have a great meal, but it was all disguised and wrapped in this idea of two people coming together that don't know each other to be of service and creating a day of friendship where for one day there was no rich and there was no poor. There was just us. There was no other. And that's really what started the Wayfarer Foundation and our work with the unhoused. And now the foundation is a grant giving organization. My partner, Steve Sarowitz, who's an incredible man and the founder of Blue Marble Payroll, is my partner and co-chair in Wayfarer Studios. And he's doing a lot of his giving through the foundation and us together. And we're just looking for organizations that also represent Baha'i values, that are eradicating the isms of the world and looking to empower and uplift segments of humanity. And we're continuing our work with the unhoused in LA. And it's just an aspect of what we're doing. And we hope that is going to be also a branch for our studios to make sure that every time we release a project or a film or a TV show, there's a grassroots element of actually affecting change that goes along with that.
Yeah. And I love the way everything is integrated, and it comes down to not only, honoring your Baha'i faith, but helping the community, helping others. You're giving back so much, as well as with your creativity and your talent. So Justin, as we say goodbye, I could talk to you all day. I really could, but let people know where they can find out more, where they can find your book, find you online, etc.
Well, my book's available pretty much everywhere you get books. You can order it from Target or Barnes & Noble or Amazon. We just launched the Man Enough podcast, which is really kind of a conversation starter that goes along with the book, where every week we have a new guest, which is great. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc., or manenough.com/podcast. And I'm on the social media. So it's just my name, Justin Baldoni, if you want to come hang out. And trying to figure out how that whole thing works and keep myself grounded and continue to do this hard work, as I say in the book, just publicly, but more importantly, privately.
And thank you so much for doing it. You are making an impact. You're making a difference. And I appreciate you being on the show today, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Books That Make You show today. And you can always find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget to ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you subscribe so you always get updates when we do interviews with great guests and authors like Justin.
She did that in one take too, everybody. I'm just making sure you know that.
I did. Thank you again. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, enjoy the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.